Oh, the Mutual Validation Club was right there. Obasanjo was in attendance. And there he was, even as Ibrahim Badamashi Babangida was acknowledging what we already all knew. MQ won the election. So what was IBB telling us? Oh, I forget. The Mutual Validation Club was right there. The Jagaban of the universe, who today sits in Aso Rock, a beneficiary of Abiola's sacrifices, was also sat there. Oh, and don't worry. I'm sure Mr. Peter Obi already knows exactly what I think of his attendance at that gathering. Nobody sat in that gathering covered themselves with any glory. Sometime in this last week, a collection of men and women sat in Abuja, and a decrepit man, lacking in integrity, a man who blighted this country, was launching a book. He was launching a book where he essentially honed up to the crimes that he committed against the Nigerian people and the Nigerian state. A crime that culminated in the ruination of multiple lives, the death and burial of untold numbers in unmarked graves. He didn't tell us, by the way, who killed Delegiwa. Not a word. At least I haven't seen any from the excerpts that have been flying around with the book that they are deliberately giving away cheaply because it's a bundle of lies. But sat in that room, before talking about those sat in that room, I think it is important that, without intending to scandalize anyone, I must draw this parallel quickly. About 2-3 years ago, I ran into some video of members of the family of a dead politician, one of those who was actually murdered by the coupists in the first coup. And his children were celebrating, I think, a memoriam in his honor. But here is where I was. At the point when their father was killed in the first coup, the man was reputed as being the most corrupt of Balewa's ministers. But by the time his children were celebrating his memorial, he was being celebrated as a great nationalist. This is possible in a society that has failed to document its history, or that has resorted to a distortion of history. So those who should be examples of reprobates are being erified, even as the witnesses of that history have died out. So as a society, when you fail to document history, you concede the right to write whatever they care in their hagiographic exercises. So yeah, Babangida can sit down, probably pay some fat cat ghostwriter, tell his story of disservice to a people and to the memories of multiple persons whom he disrespected with his many lies, half truths, and urban legends. And if we shall fail to take on the duty of preserving our memories and writing our stories, we will yet find that in generations to come, the rogues will be the ones being applauded, and they would have managed to criminalize the saints. The real heroes would have been forgotten. And then in that all, you have what I would call the mutual validation club. One of those, and I'm not talking about written history, I was there as a witness of history. I remember Chief Obasanjo, or shall I say General Obasanjo, in that season, talking about how Abiola was not the Messiah that Nigeria required. And when that Messiah came to power in 1999, stepping on the blood of Abiola, he did nothing to acknowledge the sacrifice of Abiola. He spent 8 years running away from the ghost and shadow of Abiola. And in looking to erase Abiola's memory, he desecrated even the memories of all those who lost their lives in the struggle for the actualization of June 12. The many lies about Abiola began to fly around in those days to justify painting him out and refusing to acknowledge the sacrifice. The mutual validation club was right there. Obasanjo was in attendance. And there he was, even as Ibrahim Badamashi Babangida was acknowledging what we already all knew. MQ won the election. So what was IBB telling us? Oh, I forget. The mutual validation club was right there. The Jagaban of the universe, who today sits in Aso Rock, a beneficiary of Abiola's sacrifices, was also sat there. Oh, and don't worry, I'm sure Mr. Peter Obi already knows exactly what I think of his attendance at that gathering. Nobody sat in that gathering covered themselves with any glory. It shows a crass lack of sensitivity for those who have suffered and are continuing to suffer as a result of what happened in 1993. IBB will be forever defined by the evil it did on that day, or rather to that day. IBB is busy pontificating and blaming everybody but himself. A gathering of vultures. So let's be clear. All those who gathered there were merely members of a mutual validation club. A gathering of vultures. So let's be clear. All those who gathered there were merely members of a mutual validation club. Ibrahim Babangida told us nothing we didn't know. All he did was what he has always done. Play one end against the other. With one mouth, he was talking about how it wasn't an Igbo coup. With the same mouth, he was talking about how Awolowo is not a lover of the Igbo people. What does it matter now? Which one is which? After how many dead? What does it matter? We have a duty to remember, because in this land, we're becoming a land of amnesiacs. We remember nothing of consequence, but we also forget nothing that would divide. The Igbo this, Yoruba that, Fulani this, Hausa that, Ijaw that. There is always a reason to be divided. There is always a reason to be divided. But have you seen them divided in their gathering of vultures? You forget too easily. But they never forget how easy it is to confuse you. They always stick with the script. We owe a debt to those who have died, not to forget. We owe a debt to ourselves who are yet alive, not to forget. We're the sum total of our memories, and when we as a collective forget everything of importance, how do we guide ourselves into our future? We owe a debt to those who have died. Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola is no more today. He can't speak for himself. All the pernicious lies that have been told since his death to justify the annulment of the election, they were barely afterthoughts. I voted in that election. I wasn't a child. I was old enough to vote, and it was the first election in which I voted. All these pernicious accusations came after the fact, just to justify the annulment, to justify what a bunch of ne'er-do-wells sat down in a room to do. If he was a drug pusher, why wasn't this in the public space for us to decide whether we wanted a drug pusher or not? That was in the public space in 2023, and it didn't make any difference to the outcome because our choice did not count. The only reason our choice did not count was because it did not in 1993. If our choices had mattered in 1993, they wouldn't have dared 30 years later to tell us to go to court. Let us be clear about that. We have a duty to the dead to remember. Those who died, whether they were active participants in the protests against Babangida, the subsequent ruination under Abacha, everything that followed from June 12, 1993 till date, all the evils that have overtaken this country are traceable to the many actions of Ibrahim Badamashi Babangida before June 12, crystallized on June 12. The ultimate expression of citizenship is the right to choose who leads you. That is the ultimate expression of citizenship. In the absence of the right to choose your leaders, you are not citizens, you are subjects. I expressed my right as a citizen to vote on the 12th of June, 1993. That right was taken away from me by a group of thieves led by Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, ably explained away by General Obasanjo, originally resisted by the likes of Bulaba, who are today beneficiaries of that evil, but have all forgotten and are today more repressive than what we all fought at that time.